again. So Izzy's asked me to speak on race preparation, and with a broad audience to come to, I suppose I've left it fairly broad to start with an opportunity then to ask some questions amongst the group as well and find out what works for people. But I think when I first looked at the topic, it was mainly about why do we actually race? So what's the reason for racing to start with? Because rowing can be an enjoyable activity without the actual racing part, with all the things that come with that, pain and uncertainty and everything else. So I think when we look at why we race, generally if we try and distill it, while everyone's got their own motivations, it comes down to discovering what our potential is and working out whether we can maximise that potential at a set time for a set purpose, for a set event. So for me, that was really about where we're looking at with race preparation, and that's what the outcome of the preparation is, to maximise your potential when you want it to be maximised. So then, looking at race preparation and also having a bit of a chat today to the person that I share my office with, Michael Quinn, and the amount of ideas and information that's out there about anything, but particularly if you typed into any of the search engines how to prepare for a race, you would get a wide variety of different things. Some of those things would be relevant, some of them would be irrelevant, and the rest would be somewhere in between to your purpose or to somebody else's purpose. So there's a really broad range of things that are out there around race preparation. And so how do we then go about distilling that and simplifying it? So really where I got to at the end of it was having something that everyone who's here today or listening to this could take away, and something that we can all relate to. So when I thought about race preparation and a way to explain it, it really fitted in quite nicely to something that all of us as rowers know and understand, and that's a rowing race. So I'll try and relate it basically to that, and that's how I've split up this presentation. So feel free to jump in and ask some questions where you like, or jump in and keep eating food as you like as well. So the first thing is getting on the water. So when we race, we've got to actually get ourselves on the water, and it's the same thing for when we're doing our race preparation. We need to make sure that we give ourselves plenty of time to get to the start line. So that's the first aspect of it. If it's rushed, we're not going to be able to maximise our potential, and that's in the short term when we're trying to get to the start of a race line, but it's also in the long term in terms of that race preparation, that you need to give yourself that time to be able to prepare adequately for the event that you're going to do. You also need to pick an event that's going to allow you to have some success as you want to define it, or at least that you're going to enjoy. So there's no point in signing up for something that you're not going to be able to have a goal that you think you realistically might be able to achieve. Fair enough to have a stretch goal, but it really should be something that you're planning towards, that at the end of the day you'll be able to assess your metric against what you went in there with, and more importantly to have something enjoyable that you look back and think that you had something valuable that came from that experience. So really it's making sure that you've turned up in your event, not in the event afterwards or the event before, but when you're sitting on the start line, you're actually in the event that you're supposed to be there for. You also need to understand what your goal is. So are you just there because your friends are doing it? Are you just there because you think that it's the thing to do if you've been rowing for a long time and you need to then take it to racing? Are you doing it to get to a different step of the process, or is it something that you want to achieve for yourself? A place, a time, a selection. So being clear about that goal when you sit on the start line is really important, because one thing that we have to accept with racing is that racing is going to hurt in some form or another. And if we don't have an understanding of what the goal is that we're out to achieve, there's two parts to it. One is it's going to be really difficult to get ourselves through the pain, and the second one is we're just not going to be able to reach our potential because we won't be able to see why we're doing it to get the maximum out of ourselves. So when we're thinking about that race preparation, it's really clear it's really important to have a clear goal to understand what you're trying to achieve. And the other one that relates to getting on the water is understanding the conditions. So we know that when we get on the water, we have a look and we see, is it a headwind? Has the wind forecast come down from 13 knots to 8 knots? Is it a still day? Is it raining? All of those types of things. We do that naturally when we sit on the start line or when we go to boat. But when we're preparing for racing in that really long-term picture, we need to understand the conditions that we have ourselves, but also around us. So do we have a family that we also have to fit the race preparation around? Do we have to have study, jobs, other aspects that is going to factor into the preparation that we can do? There's no point in thinking that your race preparation can be Olympic standard if you've got a 60-hour-a-week job, plus you're trying to look after 2 kids and sick parents or several other things. So understanding those conditions will help you understand the preparation that you can actually put into that race plan, which then in turn helps you understand and set realistic goals about the event that you're in, but also the outcome that you might be able to achieve. And also to maybe think, at this period of time, I can do this, and so maybe this is the correct event for me, or the correct racing for me, and the correct outcome. But in a period of a longer time, I might have more time to build that preparation. So it's not just a short-term type of thing. So really understanding those conditions when you start out gives you that preparation then to set yourself up for some success, or at least some reality. And then the start. 3/4 half, 3/4 full. And so that kind of, to me, said, when you start off with that preparation, lots of us, we set our goal and then we go off like a bull out of the gate with full preparation. We go from doing nothing to doing 6 sessions a week on the water, plus 3 weight sessions, plus 2 ergs, plus a cycle. And after 3 weeks, we're injured, we're really unhappy, we don't have any friends left because they all think that we're very grumpy, and our performances drop off as well, so we're really not getting where we want to get to. So when we do have that preparation to start with, it really is pretty similar to a start. You need to make it incremental, and you might even have that backward step of going from 3/4 to a half as you start to build up to that full preparation. You can't expect to go from nothing to full speed straight out of the gate. And so that also has to be part of that broader perspective of race and competition preparation.
Verity, can I just ask, how long would you expect in terms of a time frame if you're building into, say, the stuff, your pre-season, you've done nationals, you've had a month break or whatever, how long would you expect to spend going from having your break to being at your full kind of volume?
I think it probably depends on where you've come from in the past and what you've actually done in your break, and whether you have any of those underlying factors, so injury and other types of things that fit in there. But really, I think it's probably somewhere between a month and 6 weeks that you need to look at, or realistically double the time that you've had off. So, or 1.5 of the time that you've had off to build back into that, particularly if you're then going to have a long campaign. Yeah. So if you're looking at a nationals campaign, you might have 6 weeks off, but I think realistically, in terms of where you want your preparation to be building back into it, you're probably going to be 8 to 12 weeks before you're at the same kind of speed and those ergo scores, etc., those markers that you're hitting as you came into that preparation. For a shorter campaign, it's obviously a little bit different, but I think the same principle applies. If you've gone from doing nothing for 10 years and you've got a goal in 12 weeks, you would still want to, I think, start with that graduated preparation with that end goal in mind.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Not to mention hands full of blisters when you had some time off and then you go back. Okay, and so after I start, then it's important to lengthen out and build a rhythm. So whatever our race preparation is, if it's a year long or if it's only that sort of short goal, 6 to 12 weeks, we need to find that rhythm and pace so that there is an opportunity for you to build, particularly in our sport, some aerobic background, but also embed the skill set that you need to have. So lengthening out, thinking about it that way, and building the rhythm, the consistency of turning up all the time and making sure that you're in the flow of things. And it's also important, as we see in the first 500, you start and your first little bit, you're feeling really good, and then all of a sudden it hits you and you think, I'm only 30 strokes into this and 250 metres, and it's really starting to hurt a lot. So it's very important then, once you get into that rhythm, that you have a fair bit of positive self-talk and some of those smaller goals along the way, so that you can understand that, you know, your lifestyle has probably changed quite a bit. Things are difficult to fit in, and you're starting to feel that bit of grind after feeling really good coming into the set period. So it's important then to recognise that you need to have that positive self-talk around your race preparation, and circling back to, why am I doing this? Both your end goal, but also the enjoyment factor of it as well. Once you get into the middle of race preparation, it is like the middle of the race. The key is to get in lots of good strokes, and that means getting lots of good, steady, consistent training sessions. The other aspect is to make sure that you've got a focal point. So it's very easy, as you know, when you're in the middle of the race, to sometimes, even though there's a lot of confusion around, to get focused on something that is not really very helpful. Whether it's the bow seat is hitting a buoy, and that's all you're concentrating on because you can hear it every time it comes through, and that's really annoying for you, or that your foot stretches a bit creaky and that's the only thing that you can actually hear. So those things are not the focal point. So what is your focal point? And it's a good vision that you can imagine that the best rowing that you do in mid-race stuff is when your focal point is sort of almost not focused. So that the focal point, when you're looking forward and you don't actually see much, is a good vision for having that longer term effect of focusing on where you need to be going and what you need to be doing, rather than getting caught up in one bad session or a squeaky gate or the fact that your training partner turns up late every day, or that someone steals your car park. So all of those types of things can affect getting in lots of good strokes. So it's important to have that focal point that's a bit more down the boat and towards the goal. And the next one that's really important is, we've all been in races where we've had a bad stroke. So whether you've actually caught a crab, or whether you've nearly caught a crab, or whether someone else in the boat has taken a washout stroke, there's nothing you can do once that's happened. It's the same if you have a bad session, or you get sick, or work means that you can't actually complete as much as you would have liked in that particular time. You can't go back and do it, but you need to get on with the next stroke. And that then encompasses that idea of getting in lots of good strokes rather than focusing on the things that you've missed, or trying to make up and do 3 sessions in a day. You can't take 3 strokes in place of the stroke that you took that was bad. You need to get on with the next stroke and make that a quality one. So in that race preparation phase in the middle, it's really key to make sure that you have that consistency and you're getting in effectively lots of good strokes. So when you get into the third 500, and the picture that I've got up here is at the top of Mont Ventoux. So Mont Ventoux is a big, huge mountain in the south of France that stands out. It's somewhere where people like to go and challenge themselves on a bike, and it's really, really difficult. But when you get to the top of Mont Ventoux, there is a fabulous lolly stall that's at the top. So when you're in the notorious third 500, it's important that you give yourself a bit of a pat on the back. Think about some of those rewards that you're going to reward yourself with for getting through the really painful part of the process, and make sure that you're focused on continuing to get the good strokes in. But we all know that in the third 500, you can imagine some pretty crazy and hilarious things while you don't have a lot of oxygen going to your brain. So the same thing in that race preparation. There is that period just before you start to get to the part where your race is coming up, where you hate your coach, you hate the people that you row with, you're considering your life choices in terms of the sport. It's important not to get too deep into those and to try and think about the lolly stall at the top of the mountain. And as we get to the last 500, so when you can start to see that preparation part has come together, you've done the bulk of the preparation, you're not going to make up 6 lengths in the last 500, so you have to have done all the preparation that's happened before. But when you get to the last 500, you know that you're closing in on that goal. You can start to see and feel what you've been trying to chase, and things start to come together. So the race day, so if it's school events, things start to ramp up in the school environment. If you're travelling to a regatta, you're getting yourself organised to go away, and those things like wrapping boats, etc., that really start to get you ready to close in on the goal. And similar to a last 500, in terms of your race plan, things get more specific. There's small changes that you focus on, and it's all the 1%ers that keep you in the race. And so with that in mind, it's things like speed sessions that you do in the last part of that preparation, making sure that you can do good starts, making sure that you understand what you like to eat before racing, and all of those types of things that are the 1%ers then that go into making the actual racing event work for you. So as you know, race plans generally are fairly broad across the middle of the race, and then the last 500 it starts to get really specific what you're specifically working on. Is it quick catches for 5 strokes and then moving on to something else that's very specific? It's the same in that race preparation. As you start to get towards that goal, it's time to tidy up all of those small aspects and get things ready to go. And also, I think, importantly, preparing to be on autopilot, because once you get to your race or the event, you're going to have a lot of focus on what you're going to do. So it's likely that if you haven't thought about what you need in your bag on regatta day prior to that you're going to be a mess. So preparing yourself to be on autopilot is similar to preparing yourself to go into the last 250 when your brain isn't really switched on, because if it was, you'd have jumped out of the boat about then. So you need to be ready to be on autopilot. And then lifting to the line. Once you get to that last phase, it is like coming into the last part of a race. There is that lift because you're travelling to the regatta, you're on the school bus, there's an assembly or whatever it is. People around you know that this important event is coming up for you, and it is the thing that starts to lift you towards the line. In terms of tapering specifically, that's probably the best thing, the best analogy I could think of for how you should feel. You should feel like it is that last lift to the line when you're in a really close race. You probably feel tired, but you have that energy there anyway. So where you want to be is to, in terms of your training, know that you've done all the work, so you're relaxed about that part of it. Understand that in that last 500 section, you've tidied up all the small things, so that you feel in the very last part for the taper, that you don't need to exert yourself, and the feel that you're looking for is that feel of exhilaration as you lift to the line, that you should feel good, that you feel like you can jump out of your skin a little bit, that you're not feeling tired and through the routine. You're looking forward to achieving that goal. And as you lift to the line, there is always that little bit extra, and that's where you're looking to do that, maximising your potential. You thought you knew where your potential was, but it's the crowd or the coaches or the feel of the race that lifts you to be something more than you could achieve in training. And then importantly, once the event is done and that race preparation, it's important, whether it's right on the finish line or in that period of time that you have that's pretty special for rowing, between the finish line and when you get back to the pontoon, to actually reflect. Accept the result that you got, work out what you learnt from it, work out what you're proud of, work out what you would change, and I suppose also, particularly if it's something that you've been preparing for a long time, work out how it's changed you. Some of the time we don't actually achieve our goal in that 6 minutes or 7.5 minutes or 5 minutes, depending on the event and the distance. But once we cross the finish line, we need to learn to accept the result as it is and then reflect on what we've learnt and how it's changed us, so that it helps to start for the next cycle of preparation for whatever it is that we're doing. It's really one of the special things about rowing, that there's not many other times that you really get to test yourself. And if you can do that, it does hold you in good stead for a lot of things across your life. So the final slide, some hot tips. So similar image, an image from the same trip as the lollies at the top of Ventoux. I think we reflected at the start, there's a lot of information out there. And so people will often think in their race preparation, particularly as it gets very close to the race, what if I do this? What if I do that? This person said I should do that. I read here that we should do this. Generally, if you've been with plan A, stay with plan A, and then when you think about changing, stay with plan A and don't move to plan F. F for failing or not reaching it. So I suppose the image there is really to show you, to reflect on, I think, some of the conversations that you hear around boat parks about people who look at the weather and the conditions and say, maybe I should move my inboards, maybe I should change my rig. It's really something to weigh up and understand where that fits into the whole of your preparation. And the other key aspect to understand is who are the cheerleaders in your camp and who are the coaches. The cheerleaders are people who give us advice and cheer us on, but sometimes they don't know the specifics or they're not experts in that area. They might have some helpful advice about what worked for them. They might have some helpful advice about what worked for somebody else that they knew, but they're not in your situation. So it's really important that you have a clear understanding of who your coaching group are, the people that know you, your goal, and the broader preparation, and who are the cheerleaders, who are the people that you can say, thanks very much for offering those carbo shots to me, but I've never ever taken them before, so I'm not going to take them 45 minutes before I race in my event that I've prepared 12 months for, because I think we can probably all find enough people that we know that would tell you the outcome of that story. So have your equipment checked, make sure you're all prepared, but in the autopilot mode, not in the maybe I need a new boat, or maybe I should change my rig, or maybe a triple tandem would be a good idea. So they were the hot tips at the end of sort of bringing that together. But hopefully from this what you can take is an analogy about race preparation that should work for whatever event and whatever style of event you're looking at. We also need to keep in mind that for 99.5% of us, we're not Olympians. We don't have access to the resources, the time, the coaching, all of the specialist services that they have, but we can still have an outcome that can have a positive influence on our life by preparing for things well in that similar vein of things. So I'd encourage you to keep an eye on that big picture about race preparation. Look for the specifics as they apply to you, your conditions and the events that you're in, and then look at the goal and that reflection piece afterwards. And happy to answer any questions or feedback or that people might have.
Yeah, I've got one.
Sure.
Just with coming back into training, like, you know, if you're sick or injured, you said it might be, you know, 1.5 to 2 times longer. Could you please elaborate on that a bit?
I think it depends really on what your actual circumstance is, and reflecting on that piece that I've just said about cheerleaders and coaches, you really should trust the people that you work most closely with, because they will understand you, and you'll also have a really good relationship with them to give them the feedback about what's working and what's not. So I think it's more around that slide about 3/4 half, 3/4 full, and the feedback that you feel from that to get yourself to the rhythm, rather than if you've got a rib stress fracture, it should be 2 weeks, or it should be 1.5 times the amount of time that you've had off. But it certainly is one to understand as you progress as an athlete, to understand your rhythm and understand when it's off.
So it's better to almost underdo it a little bit if you're, you know, if you're getting back in, then to overdo it.
Yeah, I think the key one there is just to understand that feedback cycle. So once you do something, analyse what the feedback is. Once you do that first increment, what's the feedback? What's the feedback at the next increment? You know, and it relates not only to pain, but also to, you know, the output of your training. So are you able to physically get into the same position? Are you able to progress your boat speed? Are you able to recover? And probably that's the key one, is how you're recovering, particularly if you've had viruses and those types of things.
On that note, I reckon, I mean, you guys are probably different because you've got a good coaching team around, but I've certainly known athletes who are maybe masters or whatever, and maybe are a bit more self-guided in their kind of training plan, trying to do it themselves, and they can often err on the side of just being really disciplined and just like, well, I've said that I'm going to do this plan, so I'm just going to keep doing it, and my knee's a bit sore, but whatever, and then 3 weeks later they've got a knee injury and they can't walk. Like,
I suppose that's adjusting to the conditions. Your race plan might be to rate to 36, but if you're going into a screaming headwind, then rating 36, you may be able to actually achieve that, but you're not going to be able to move the boat anywhere. Or so if you can think about those types of things with those analogies, it may help you move past the rigidity of what you have set in place and focus on the rhythm and getting good strokes in.
Just for fun, if you had to make your perfect pre-race routine on race day, what would it look like? You know,
for me personally?
Or from, 48 hours pre-race, what would you do?
I think ultimately it is that you just don't have any interruptions, but that's not life. So I think it is really around that preparation that you've done in the 12 months beforehand, that you have those systems in place, that you don't have to worry about that type of thing, and that allows you then to deal with the traffic on the way there, or your race getting delayed. So I think the perfect preparation is one where it just flows, particularly because of the work that you've done prior. I know, having dealt with school programs, They are multi-elemented things, that there's lots of stuff going on, and that best preparation is when the preparation has been done long before, so you can handle delays in races, somebody being sick on the day. So I think, yeah, the perfect preparation probably doesn't exist unless you can be in a vacuum. But if you've done enough preparation prior, then you have the mental capacity to deal with things that come up on the day.
What about in Masters, where we have very little turnaround time between races? What would be your best advice on nutrition and hydration? And
I think systems are probably the most important thing. So having a set system, and one that you can practice even in training a little bit. So the routines and systems of, if you know you're going to have a long day with lots of turnarounds and lots of events and different racing, what are the systems that you can set up personally, even if it's, so for me, I've got a square bag, and I know then I can set up a couple of different water bottles and have them colour coded, and the food that I need ready to go, so that I don't have to think about it in between. And I sort of practice that then when I'm really busy at work. That's the setup that I generally have, even in those practice things, so that you get into a good habit of, once you've finished training, that you're practicing almost what you're going to be doing. Because as masters rowers, most of you are going to be going straight from training off to work or the next thing that you need to get onto, and it's quite similar to going from one racing block to the next. And then I think the other one is, if you've got a heavy day of racing, to make sure that you've got food that you know that you can eat easily, that is going to be accessible, and that is probably more than you need, particularly at the back end of the day. And I think, reflecting more and more on my experience of riding, probably planning on more nutrition than you need and real food helps you, particularly at the back end of the day when you are tired and you don't want to eat because you're thinking about 50 other things. So if you have more than you probably plan for or think you might need, it's better to have more than not enough. You might be able to help a crewmate out, but you probably also get home safely.
The issue we have is that we can't generally go back to our bags between races.
Yeah.
We're literally jumping out of one boat.
Right.
Can you put a Ziploc bag with some snake lollies in the
So
boat you're
what would
going
be
into?
yeah, I mean, snake lollies sort of not
bit of
great,
sugar to get you
but
through.
what sort of things would you suggest?
Personally, I think particularly as you get older, real food is better than fast nutrition. Just the way that people's guts work. You guys can eat chorizo sticks and and not be affected. But so I think, again, particularly if you're working with a crew, to practice some of that in training. And again, it's a reflection from cycling. Cycling, people will often take nutrition and have it while they're training. It's not necessarily a done thing in rowing, but I think if you've got that crew that you can then practice that with, and things like rice cakes, muesli bars, wheat bix with jam, all of those types of things are easy to eat, and whatever really works for you that is going to be accessible and palatable.
So how are you feeling in prioritising boats and that, with identifying the races that you really want to win, as opposed to ones you just want to compete in?
I think that's a really good question, and I think that's a difficult one in a squad dynamic, and probably you need to be clear with the people that you're working in what they are, because it is difficult to work out the perceived effort that you can give across events when you're racing, you sort of really, the expectation is that you're giving full effort. But I think what you can do if you have those prioritised events is make sure that your preparation allows you to peak for that particular event in the other aspects. So whether that's your hydration or whether you're possibly using some caffeine around that day, and I think your fatigue levels as well. But it's a valid question without probably a great answer other than the group understanding what the priorities of the day are. Have you had experiences that have worked well or not worked well?
Yeah, our squad, we remember the priority boat.
Yep.
And that's the one we go to win.
Yep.
And then we have the other small boats usually. These days at Masters we like to race the 8.
Yep.
And that was the target. And the small boats are nice to win, but yeah.
Yeah. So just to be clear from my perspective answering the question, that goal is a goal of the whole squad, that there's a common understanding about what the priority boat is.
Yeah.
Yep. I think if there's a common understanding about what the priority boat is, it's easier to work your preparation out with the group and make sure that there is, if you possibly can, recover between the smaller boats and your key big boat, and I think have an agreement around what your technical focuses are going to be in those non-priority boats to give you something to focus on within the race environment to allow you to measure your perceived effort, if that makes sense. So in a pair, if you're working together on your length in the boat, then that allows you to focus on that during the actual race, whereas in your priority boat you may be more focused on the actual pressure points within that race. If that makes any sense or any value?
I think it is hard for Masters because we don't train generally in one boat.
Yep.
We train for 5 races and you're in and out of boats like you are on race day. So
Yep.
it's quite hard to have that sort of focus within the squad because everyone's got different.
Yeah, and I suppose that's where I thought probably the question, and that's a harder question to answer, is when your priority boat may be a different boat to somebody else's.
Yeah.
And it is a good challenge. I think it'd be good to have Annabelle around to see how, from some lived experience in terms of that pressure of situation of where she was racing in the pair and also racing in the 4. But again, in an Olympic situation,
it's pretty uncommon at that level. Most guys at the international level, they got one boat.
Yep, they got one boat and a really very clear focus. I suppose the way that for Masters, if it is your focal point is performing well at the regatta as a whole, and so that focus is probably not as sharp and pointed as a single event, even if you have a key event within that. If you can think of a picture of a group of people, you're focusing on the group of people rather than on the specific individual in that photo and blurring out the rest of it. You still have all the faces in there, but your focus is more around making sure you can perform over the event and give your best performance within that event.
I think at Nationals there's more of a focus because it's over 4 days.
Yeah.
Whereas at state level it's 5-6 races within 4 hours.
And again, I think where you're at state level, that preparation on that day is part of the preparation for the Nationals, where you get to put things under pressure and all of your organisational strategies, and you are putting in good strokes in your second and your third and your fourth race. they lead into that preparation for your nationals, where you have more time and more ability to focus, because you must have some good backing in saying, well, I know I can do 5 races in one day, and maintain my form. That gives me good confidence that I can lay down some really good form in my one race on this day here.
So I think that's possibly one of the questions is, it's probably too late now for our states, but is how you manage that taper or that build up to states, knowing that you're going to the nationals in 10 days' time.
It's probably a similar situation with school crews. If you've got a first state or whatever that's racing head of the river and then nationals, sometimes 4 days later, 5 days later, you've got your first state doing the schoolboy 8 or whatever.
I think it's easier that it's a shorter period of time. If it was over a couple of weeks, then you'd be peaking and then troughing and peaking again.
I heard someone talking about going away to pathways after nationals.
Oh, good.
How did you find that, those dual focuses?
So we didn't find out the pathways cruise until like I think 2 weeks before nationals started. So we were already midway through our taper. We kind of just finished that, and then I had 2 days off, and then we were just trying to hold that peak for the rest of it. Because I was also training a skull as well, so I was pretty much trying to get as many water sessions as possible, and it wasn't really hurting. It wasn't like the gym. Just try to hold it as like where I was for as long as possible.
It's a challenge. If you can work with your coaching group or the squad with that longer preparation over the 6 to 12 months or the campaign period to understand, so what is your true goal? If your true goal is nationals, then states becomes a different goal, and you can balance your training cycles to understand that, to allow for states to be a focal point, but the learnings from that to be different. So what are you going to take from states that you will then refine for nationals?
I heard, might have been last year, the year before, one of the, Mahe Drysdale, the Kiwi sculler, he did Henley Royal Regatta, and he was trying to win the Diamond Scull or whatever it was for the 10th time in a row. But he was also training with the Kiwi 8 or something like that. He had this national team crew boat that was training and getting ready for Tokyo or World Champs or whatever it was. And he went and did a 20k, 25k session in the Kiwi 8, 3 hours before the final for this Henley Regatta. So normally the Henley would be like, this huge peak event and a really, priority of the season for most boats. But for him, if his priority was to do World Champs or Tokyo or whatever, then it was like, different priorities, I guess.
Are there any supplements you would recommend taking before a race, or any you avoid taking? Or?
I think if we look at our one here, the main message is don't do anything that you haven't done before and try it in practice, is the overarching message. And then beyond that, I think anything that you're taking other than real food, you need to do a lot of investigation into, and understand the effects that it has on you might be different to the effect that it might even have on your training partner. So for me, personally, real food and real nutrition is more and more valuable. You can play around a little bit. There's no doubt that caffeine has some effect, but again, the effect is different on different people, and it becomes then part of your race preparation. If you feel that you want to explore that avenue, then seek out coaching advice, not your cheerleader's advice, and make sure that you understand how that's going to affect you, whatever it is, whether it's pickle juice or a branded supplement. You need to have an understanding of how it is actually going to impact you and the dual impacts that it has. So what's it going to have, what is the actual effect it has on you physiologically, and what's the effect it has on you psychologically. If for you having a protein shake is a psychological benefit for your race preparation, then there's nothing wrong with that. It may not impact you physiologically, but the psychological preparation of this is something that I do in preparation for racing makes it worthwhile. If you're doing it because the rest of the crew's doing it or your coach asks you to do it and it's not having a physiological impact on you and it's not having a psychological impact on you, then I would desist doing that and work out what works for you. Sorry that that's generalist. But yeah, real food is I think more and more the way to go. And if you understand what that real food is for your race preparation, you've got a better chance of replicating that wherever you're racing. So particularly if you're going away to race, understanding what nutrition you will be available to you is better than sort of having hit and miss when you get there and working out that something's not available or you didn't bring enough of it, or that the coxswain ate it all on the way in the bus.
I don't know if they're trying to get to weight.
So just if I can ask from the group in terms of your, for you guys, because you've done a racing block and you guys have got racing to come, is that correct?
Yep.
So for you guys, in terms of your racing block that's finished in your race preparation, what are the key reflections on your race preparation?
Getting sleep.
Get more sleep?
Yeah.
How are you going to do that?
Focus on it, like, or prioritize it. So instead of getting home and then wandering around for an hour or two, try and get like ready as quickly as possible, because we were doing afternoon water sessions as well. So it was quite tiring.
Just starting the preparation early and not leaving it too late, and then regretting not starting it earlier, I guess.
So that was something you learned about yourself?
Yeah.
Just similar to Liam, just being aware of what's actually achievable in the time frame.
Yep.
So there's no point in doing like aiming for 200 k's a week about 3 weeks before the regatta. You know, prioritize what's gonna make the boat move faster.
Yeah.
Be more focused on that lactic threshold or power generation instead of building your base.
Yeah,
Or
and that
enjoy
short
it.
time.
Yeah, and then obviously the exact opposite. When you're, 6 months out, feel free to do as many sessions as you want and get those Ks up, because it pays dividends towards that.
Keeps you in the race in that first part to allow you to be in the race in the last bit.
For me, yeah, I'm the same as Oscar. I'm a very, very bad sleeper, so I make sure I actually get some sleep in.
Do you see a difference when you sleep well? Does
Yeah,
it
massively.
does make a positive difference?
So, yeah, if I can sleep well, then I feel great and I can train harder, train more.
So that's a key part of your preparation to understand how you get better sleep, which will facilitate the rest of your training. And that's that understanding the conditions. Is it realistic to get 10 hours sleep?
No.
Maybe not. But can you get 6 to 7 hours quality sleep regularly within the conditions? Then that's something that you keep getting those good strokes in that build to a better race preparation, allow you to maximise your potential. And for you guys with your races coming up, whereabouts do you sort of feel that you're in the race preparation at the moment?
Well, I'm actually here from a coaching point of view, because I'm actually only got one race on the weekend, just a pair. But so it's pretty straightforward, just go clap it. We'll clap it with a week training. But I mentioned from a coaching point of view, which I've been doing for the first time in probably 28 years or so since I last coached. So I'm interested in how we sort of get the crew all focused on the same outcome and working with them. And so it's a whole bunch of guys with different views at the start of the year, and get them all focused on one view and getting them to do the work and develop evenly through the squad. So.
Yeah, and that's a master squad?
No, it's open squad.
Oh, an open squad, yep. So still having to deal with those people going to work,
Yep.
people studying, people available at different times, people have different capacities to do more and less training.
Different desires, when the guys that are there from just a participation point of view.
Yeah.
So the guys that are nationals, and how do you deal with that, and how do you motivate these guys to do the extra work so that they don't bring the rest of the boat down.
Yeah, and I suppose for them to see the small goals, to work the reason why they're there, and to work towards achieving that goal and making the boat better, and what personally comes to them from having better boat feel, to encourage them to move forward as well.
Yeah.
Mine is the juggling the states versus the nationals.
Yeah.
And fatigue. So
Yeah.
I've been sort of
Having a life.
part of 3 different squads and managing the different expectations from those squads. When those squads' goals are different, each squad is different. And I think there's a bit of panic coming in because of the fatigue.
Yeah.
And like one of the girls in the boat this morning, I said, "Oh my God, states are in 3 days. I don't feel fit." And she goes, "You've done the training."
Yeah.
And that's a bit of a confidence thing, knowing that we've done 8, how many months it is.
Yeah.
6, 7 months of serious training to get to this point, but it's a fact now of trying to manage the fatigue so that training pays off.
Yeah. So I think to me that is a bit like that final part of a race when you're in the race. So you've got yourself to be within your at the front of the race, and there's a lot of crews that are within a bow ball or a half a length, or you're in that position yourself. You can go one way or the other, that you can panic and say like, geez, we've got to do something different, or I'm not ready, or we'll change the plan. Or you can say, we've got ourselves in the race, we back ourselves for the work that we've done to get to this point, to put us in the race, and now what we need to do is to be confident and feel that lift rather than be in the race and panic.
Yeah.
And I'm sure in terms of your involvement in regattas, you've seen crews go both ways of we're here, let's capitalise on the good work that we've done and have that self-confidence, and the crews that are there and think like, goodness me, we need to do something different, and it all falls apart. You can stay together and back in as your crewmate said, the good work that you've done to get you in the race, to get you to the last 10 strokes in the race. Should have, whatever your goal has been, you've executed the race plan, you've done the preparation, you are going to cross the finish line, the racing is going to happen. Once you cross the line, what do you reflect on then? You accept the result and reflect on, okay, we've done this better or not, and if it's that last bit about not panicking, or if it's we need to start training earlier. But I think from what you've said, you've done all of that first part of the training, it's just holding your nerve in the last part of it. Because you're tired, like you are at the end of the race.
Yeah.
And really, autopilot's pretty good at the end of the race. It's when you start thinking about things that then crazy crabs or missed strokes happen, that you're thinking about what's that other crew doing. It's just staying on autopilot and keep getting in the good strokes, back in the work that you've done. All right, well, thanks for being a great audience and giving